Dude,
rambling
there's
questions.
such an art to interviewing and being interviewed.
No.
Like I'll have dudes that'll hit me up on Instagram and go, yo man, I just started my podcast. I'm not even 5 eps in. Can you be a guest?
Right.
Now, they're not expecting in a million years I'd say yes.
Right.
And you know, sometimes it's hard for me I can't say yes to everyone, but every now and then I'll be like, yo man, let's do it.
Right.
And then we'll do it. And the dude, I remember I was being interviewed by one guy, and halfway through I said, hey man, I could tell you're new at this. If just going forward, when you have a guest, let them talk. That's why you have a guest. And you talking a million miles an hour.
Right.
First of all, slow down.
Yeah.
Make your points, but then stop and let your guest get in, because that's why you have him.
Yeah.
And if depending on who that guest is, if he's big enough or interesting enough, the fans want to hear him.
Right.
So you know. Be a better host. Slow down, relax. So, you know, and I've been doing stand-up 31 years. I've done 1 million interviews, radios and TVs. And so I'm not saying I'm an expert, but you know what you know.
Yeah.
You know, you figure shit out.
You see that art of conversation for what it is. Like even the other day, I was watching a clip from this other podcast that Joe Rogan went on, and it's like 6 people, and then Joe Rogan gets plunked down in the middle of it. And I'm sitting there with like a total critical eye because I'm seeing everybody act weird as fuck to him, because these are all people.
Because he's Joe Rogan?
Because he's Joe Rogan. They don't. Like, Joe Rogan is the #1 person from having watched over the years where he does not want to be reminded of the fact that he's extremely wealthy and influential and famous, you know?
Right.
A lot of people want to be reminded of that because they're sort of in the middle. He already knows he's out of the top of the pile.
Right.
So you just kind of look like a dick sucker when you're just like making jokes over and over about how important he is. And he doesn't like it. And then also, they're all talking over each other so crazy. And Joe says, this is why it sucks having a whole bunch of people on the same podcast. They just end up talking over each other, because you've noticed that with him. He used to have a bunch of co-hosts. Now he's simplified it down to 2-3 people.
But again, this is what you learn, because, you know, there have been guys who have asked me to do podcasts where it's 4 or 5 hosts.
Right.
And again, I'm not the most famous guy in the world, but I'm not a regular Joe Blow either. But I'll sit there and that talking over each other thing, and I'm like, people don't understand. People think even if you get 5 comedians and go, man, 5 comedians, go. You think it's like pickup ball.
Right.
Jordan playing with Magic and Bird and Dominique.
Yeah.
No, everybody's trying to dominate.
Right.
So there's an art to it. You can have 5 comics, but it don't work unless we all know how to go, pull back.
Right.
Let him finish his point. Don't talk over him. It's got to flow.
Right.
It's got to be a nice rhythm.
Yeah. Because like right now we have a good rhythm, very little dead space, etc. This has been a good conversation. I could imagine if we had a third. Now, if that third was somebody who was content to sort of sit back and keep an eye on the conversation and then jump in when he sees a really interesting conversation to be had that maybe we're not necessarily gravitating towards, that can be really good. But what happens way more often than not,
they say nothing.
They've got some ego, so they want to get their points off, they want to get their jokes off, and they're not honest enough with themselves to realize that maybe they should just be in their own zone unless they're needed. And when you have 2 people who are very capable of having good conversation, you really don't need more than that.
Right.
It's kind of more likely to take away from it than to add to it.
It's something about when you see that red light come on on the camera and you're in front of this mic, it's showtime. You feel the need to and the best thing you could do, just be natural.
Exactly.
Act like they not here.
Right.
And sometimes that's hard to do, because you know that this means performance time.
Because you also kind of have to be unnatural, because let's be honest, if it was me, you, and 2 other like loudmouth comedian podcaster type people, and we were all sitting here and say we're locked in this room for 2 hours and we got to just talk and there's no cameras and mics on, our conversation is not going to really look that much like what the podcast version of that conversation is like, because there's going to be times where I start talking to you and these guys start talking to each other, and that's death on a podcast. We're going to be yelling over each other. We're going to not be paying attention to each other. One of us is going to grab our phone and be looking at the phone for 10 minutes and not paying attention. Like, that's what real conversation is like. And it's really shitty for a podcast. Like, in a podcast, like the people who I do podcasts with, sometimes I just tell them, like, no phones ever. Like, it's your job to be here in the zone. I have my phone because I have questions written down, but like that's something that is so counterintuitive to so many people.
Dude, I gotta share this with you.